Kenya Gibson, who offered to do it. Kenya has a long resume, but like most people in this room, I've kind of met in a serendipitous way. Yeah. Kenya was, believe it or not, a trainer at Citigroup as one of her jobs. Thank you very much, Alexander. So, thank you. But she also worked at iHeartRadio, and she has her own podcast and nationally syndicated, radio stations throughout the country. So it was an honor to ask her to come, and it was even an honor that she accepted my text when I first sent it out. I guess that's what you call sliding into someone's DMs. But I did it successfully, and so she's here. So thank you.
For sure. Thank you. So can we share this? Can we take it off of here and that?
Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me here this evening. I'm really honored and blessed to be a part of all this. It's funny, when I was teaching you fitness classes, I didn't know that you did all these other things, right? So you're a pretty busy guy.
Yes.
And super excited for you, and the love and the support and the positive energy that's in this room for you. And congrats
Thank you.
on the book. Right? We can clap for that.
It was a labor, a long time.
So how long did it actually take you to finish the project?
Well, that's why there's so many people. I've been talking about it for so long. They're like, when is this thing going to be done?
Yeah.
I think I started the concept of making outlines a long time ago because I'm a working lawyer, so I have to honor my profession. So I spent nights and weekends trying to flesh this out. And because it's an emotional story, sometimes I had to put it down for years at a time even. So total process when I got to a draft that I thought I was comfortable with, it was about 5 to 7 years. Yeah. It's hard to remember. And the whole story with the co-op that we're fighting, that was another 7 years. So, you'll see the timeline. It's like most of my adult life I was dealing with this issue. So.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. So you learned a lot at an early age about the legal system, that it wasn't necessarily fair. Could you share a little bit about what some of those experiences were for you?
So this is an experience I had when I was in Philadelphia as a kid. And it wasn't really in the court system, but me and my friends, we were like running down the street after playing, innocent game. We were playing, we were at an arcade, I guess it was Pac-Man or whatever we were playing, and then we're all happy running down the street. We're underage. Some of my friends had been drinking, but we weren't driving. So we were running down the street, and these guys, unfortunately in Philadelphia at the time, the black African Americans and Italian Americans didn't really get along, and depending on where you lived. And so all these older Italian men kind of jumped on us and pushed us against the wall. And my friends were like, we're all ready to fight, and they were like, they're police. And so we were like, they wouldn't give us their badge numbers or anything. And at this point, I was at a boarding school, and I was home for the summer. And so I get a lot of my inspiration from television. And so I saw somebody say, who's your Sam on a cop show, which means your sergeant. And so I asked the police officer, who's your Sam? And I showed him my boarding school card, and they kind of backed away. And my friends, so there's no real justice from that standpoint, but I had a lot of street cred after that. And then another friend of mine, actually in high school, Edmund Perry, one of the people in the list, he was actually had the same experience. Unfortunately for him, it didn't work out the same way, and he passed. Or he was murdered, in my opinion. So, in a lot of people's opinion, there's films about it and essays. You grew up trying to deal with stuff and bury it, and not really know how you should react. And sometimes you don't know whether somebody's just being an asshole or they're being a racist first and an asshole. Because there's so many layers of the onion, and it comes the same way in the justice system. One of the scenes in the book, because of our neighbors, we called the police, and the police kind of turned on me. I was like, I called you, and they're like, and they had their hands on their gun. So, because and I'll call it me, Kai. Kai's wife had to step in as the white person in the room, the only white person in the family, fully white person, to kind of protect me, and that's humiliating in a lot of ways. You're a man, you think you want to defend your family, or you can, or you should, but you're powerless because people think you're less than human.
Yeah. Yeah. So you initially went into law, right, as an effort to protect yourself and your family, and then you gravitated towards doing some advocacy work for equity and equality. How would you say that that's helped you transition into the creative space?
When I went to law school, I was a teacher actually, and I was teaching elementary school, and I saw a lot of injustice in the education system. So I wanted to give back in a way. I didn't think my calling was as a teacher. I did it for 3 years because my first year honestly was so horrible. I couldn't, I had to give back more than I gave, more than they actually requested or even wanted. And so, well, what's the rest of the question?
So I just wanted to understand, like, how you've transitioned from that into the creative space.
Well, I've always been a little bit creative, but when I first started law school, I had locks like this, but because I was a poor teacher, I cut them off. I was like, I can't be a human rights lawyer. I need to earn some money, but I still, stayed with working with kids and Head Start programs, and I had a teacher when I was in high school. She said, no one can ever be a great writer until they've experienced life. And it was through all these experiences, teaching school, seeing a lot of the injustice in the world that a lot of the things I was internalizing kind of came to the fore during COVID when I had a lot of time alone to kind of sit and think. Yeah. And I started playing guitar again and writing and tried to sing. That didn't work out, so.
Well, this is working out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the basis for the storyline for the book is resilience and determination. How would you describe the main character, Kai Jones?
Kai Jones is a kind of a flawed character. I try to show his vulnerability, even though, he's mostly in the right. All of us, none of us is perfect, and if you ever think you're always right, I think that's a problem. So you'll see some of the frailties in Kai's character, some of the things he struggles with as a person, as a husband, and really just as a person trying just to make a living. And one of his issues is he's always wanted a home, and he wanted a safe home, and like it's again being taken from him like he was in his childhood.
Yeah. So I wanted to break down the boiling frog metaphor a little bit more and how that relates to some of the dangers of oppression and how that slowly can creep up or go unnoticed.
Yeah, so I don't know if people are familiar with the metaphor. Basically, it's Alex is shaking his head no. So the boiling frog is really a lesson about. Let me talk about what the boiling frog is, and then I'll talk about the symbolism. The theory is if you put a boiling frog in boiling water and hot water, it'll try to escape. But if you set them in tepid water and slowly bring it to a boil, it'll sit there and die. Now, there's some science behind that may contradict that, but the issue is, when you have tough situations, do you just accept it and keep going, and because that's what you're used to, or do you try to get out? And getting out, there's dangers. You can fall into the fire, you can hurt, you can get more hurt. So, it's like that song, "Should I Stay or Should I Go?" The question is, it's easier to stay sometimes, even if that means like slow spiritual death.
So the book creates an opportunity for self-reflection, healing, and growth for Kai Jones. What indirect effect or experience do you think that it's going to create for the reader?
I think there's a lot of people who, men especially, we don't have a big support system because we don't try, as a general matter, I know I'm being a little bit overly general in this description, but, as I grew up, men pretty much were silent. We didn't have a support network, and I'm hoping that this anecdote will give people the courage to know, like, you're not alone. You have a voice. If you're hurting, it doesn't matter if you're supposed to be the macho person. And for women as well, like to understand, when you're in relationships, whether a heterosexual relationship or otherwise, both sides have a responsibility for each other, and sometimes you just don't know how to express that because you're hurting inside. So hopefully people will identify with that and it will resonate. And actually help people kind of get through their own situations as well.
Yeah, that's good. So what were some of the challenging parts of crafting and telling Kai's story?
I was an emotional mess trying to get it done. And then, once you kind of got through that, it was, putting together kind of a storyline. I've never written a full novel, so I had to really understand, story arcs. Which I studied a little bit in school, but I never really devoted a lot of time to it. So a lot of it was kind of, trial and error. I actually had very good people that were offered to be my beta readers. And so we read through the first full book. Dominique was one of them. And she suffered through it, and she's a very good technician. So a lot of the original version is much different than the current version because of her and others' input. So it was humbling, because when you get so close to a story, every word counts, but it's not exactly true. You know, you don't need all the words, and there's probably some spaces in there where it's a little bit, you know, maybe too wordy, as my kids would say. I heard that on the Instagram, by the way. But I do think it reflects the kind of my thought process. You know, you think a thought and you kind of keep rewinding stories and issues, and a lot of it you can't heal from it if you keep it, you know, going.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you've really taken on this multi-dimensional approach to storytelling. How do you determine what you feel will resonate with the reader or the audience?
You know, I don't really think about the audience, at least not initially. And that might sound real weird, but I was really getting inspiration for some of the short stories I wrote just by looking at objects. I saw a painting once and I wrote about it, and I realized that a lot of my writing, although it started happy, turned dark. Almost like, you know, Medea, like you start a comedy and then it turns dark at the end. And so a lot of the stories, and one of the surprises we're going to show at the end is one of the stories that I wrote during that period when I was just kind of free flow. You know, something came out, was birthed just by that experience of sitting alone and letting the darkness come out. And I hope that, you know, that resonates with people as well.
Yeah. How would you say fighting for justice also requires confronting one's vulnerabilities?
Yeah, like I said, you're not always right. You have to, you know, if you can't accuse people of being racist because they don't like you. I mean, so, but that's what I mean by going through the onion layer. You have to like kind of peel the onion first before you can just like, okay, deal with a person, you know, mano a mano, like on just a human level. So, you know, you have to confront yourself and like, is it me? Am I the one? So I find myself a lot of times either second guessing myself or self-reflecting, and I don't think a lot of people on the other side of some of my arguments do that, and that's hard to deal with. So you always feel like, oh, I'm the person. But I do think self-reflection is good. I think, like I said, in my opinion, and you don't have to agree with me, if you think you're always right, you're probably not. So, you know, really, you know, so I try to take that to heart and really, you know, in my own life. And I try to, except for when I'm advising clients, and I'm like, I am always right.
That's good, that's funny. So the reading experience that comes from this book seems all-encompassing as it covers the ability to wrestle with external injustice and internal weaknesses. Speaking to universal truths around perseverance and the human spirit, why do you feel this is such an important story to tell for this particular moment in time?
Unfortunately, it's this, like I was reading those names going back to the 60s, and it goes all the way forward, and I could have kept writing. I would have delayed the book another year just with all these stories coming out. So it's very timely, and unfortunately it's always going to be timely for the near future at least. And when I first wrote the story, it wasn't really a story, I was just trying to give a self-help guide to people. How do you defend yourself in court? It was like a short pamphlet of 10 pages, and then I thought it's kind of boring, let's put some anecdotes around it and let's make it like real to people, and then it blossomed into this entire novel. So, you know, that's kind of the whole, how this developed over time.
It started as a pamphlet and turned into the novel?
Yeah.
Oh, so it was a pamphlet initially.
Yeah, I say Kai is me, as if you haven't guessed. I changed all the names because I don't want to go back to court. And Kai sounds like I. So Kai, we were losing the whole time, every freaking step of the way. It was just like, but fortunately there was like, people, it's very interesting, like I talk a little bit about race, but the most interesting thing in my case, like I found the most help from two groups of people in the court, and they were all like staff level. They're either older white women that thought I was kind of like, had a young face, so I was kind of cute, or young black guys. And everybody else in between there just looked down at me, so. And I lost a lot, and so I was like, and I made some pretty stupid mistakes. For if I was a practitioner representing someone else, it'd probably be malpractice. And so I wanted to kind of like simple things like, do you file the motion? You know, when you file a complaint, do you serve it first or do you file it first? And it's the reverse for the motion. I won't go into the technicalities, but those types of things that are important. And if you don't get it right, you know, it could make or break your case. And so that's what the intent was. And plus, I was pissed at my neighbors. And I wanted them to see, as I started writing the story, my dream is to have this book in Barnes and Nobles on their block, so they have to walk by it every day.
what is the message of hope and inspiration that you want readers to take away from this story?
We all fall. We all have issues. We're human, and Kai says it at one point. It's not how we fall, and we shouldn't measure ourselves by how we fall, but by our ability to get up and move on. And so that's what I hope people get in whatever situation they're in.
That's great. That's great. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Darrell Bridgers, author of Ripple of Hope from the Boiling Frog's Perspective. Are we going to open it up for some Q&A? Did you want to do some Q&A? You have time? Couple questions?
Yeah. Also, for those of you there's a little bit of distraction in the back. There's a huge step and repeat back there if you want to take pictures at some point.
It's beautiful.
But let's take a couple questions, 2 or 3, and then we can mingle a little bit as we kind of wind down, and I'll do some book signing too.
Okay, cool.
So, yeah.
So I just wanted to know what keeps you motivated to never give up because you accomplished a lot. So I just wanted to know what keeps you going.
Family. My 2 daughters are here in the audience. Like I say in the book, I never want to experience that where I can't provide for my kids, and I don't want them to grow up poor like I did and get there, and I don't want to have to pawn their instruments or their stuff. So when things get tough, I just think about them, put my head down and just grin and bear it sometimes.
Yeah.
It's not money, by the way. Anything else? Okay.
Can we clap it up again?
Oh.
When you had to step away, as you said, for even years at a time, what got you motivated to, or how did you motivate yourself to get back into the?
I have to finish a project when I start. That's part of it. I can't leave something unfinished. But also I was, things would come up. I would see more stories and more names, and I thought, I got to get this out there. And what really motivated me to finish it, there's a story. You ever see those stories where the person wakes up, they get killed, and they wake up again? And I think there's a recent one, African American rapper. He did a series like that, and at the end of his film, he did the same thing. He had the names of listed the people, and I thought, what? This is not just me. This is kind of, everyone is thinking about this, and we have to really think about how to communicate our frailties, but also in a way that supports each other. So.
100%.
I have one. Is there a different sense of fulfillment that you get from either, you're obviously an incredible practitioner of the law, and then now publishing a book. What sort of different fulfillment do you get from the 2 different sort of silos of starkly different paths?
Yeah, the writing, one of the things I want to do, because my family doesn't keep a great history because we moved around a lot. There's a lot of divorces and et cetera. I don't even have my dad's last name. And so one of the things I wanted to do is have some kind of a record for them. And that's really a sense of fulfillment. I use his name at the back cover of the book. His last name is Tillman, and I tell some stories about him and et cetera. And, I just want to, keep a record of that. And that's really fulfilling for me to be able to document. And, there's a quote in a movie that I saw, you'll see in the book. It said, "What's remembered lives." Mm-hmm. So I want people to remember certain things about their history, their paths. And I think even my daughters don't know some of these stories. I want them to know their history on my side. So, and so it will live with them. I stay away from the bad stuff because you don't need to remember everything. But, the important stuff, we should always chronicle it. And the law, I grew up on Perry Mason. I like to fight Adam. So. And Adam's my best sparring partner now. So.
Did the personal pursuit with this novel hinder any sort of efforts at further professional pursuit?
Yeah, I kept it a secret for a long time because I didn't want people thinking I was neglecting my duties. But honestly, between me, you, and the live stream. There was times where, one senior person, he would be calling me at lunch, and I would be in the court trying to, file documents, and he was like, "Where the hell are you?" And I was like, "None of your fucking business. I don't call you at lunch." And I kind of took that role, and it worked. And I was like, because I was like, he needed something from me, and I was like, I'm stuck. I don't know what to do. So I just got my back was up against the wall, so I just kind of came at him, and he was like, "Oh, okay." So it hasn't hurt me. It actually, because I wrote so many pages, like wrote thousands and thousands of pages, actually one of my bosses said, "You become a really good writer. What's going on?" Last question.
Yeah, so you mentioned how a couple times this sort of goes to some of the other questions you've been asked, but this is a fictionalized version of things that really happened to you.
Yeah.
What was it like fictionalizing your real experiences, and how did you balance being true to what really happened to you with these sort of themes of, you know, historical racism that you wanted to sort of...
Right, so there's really two stories in one. There's the fight with the co-op, and then there's a secondary story of the family, what's going on with the family. And, you know, because it was a personal story, and the ability to kind of step away is because sometimes it did get to be too much to think about and write about. So I was like, I can't deal with this, especially when you deal with issues like when my youngest daughter was in her mother's arms. They were coming in the building one day, and the guy that was the real protagonist, he slammed the door and tried to hit her in the head. And so, but then I can't do anything about it. And then you think about, am I weak? Am I like stupid? Or am I like, what should I have done? I was like, well, if I react the way I want to, there's a story my dad told me. He was, this is the last thing I'll say because I know we have to leave. Maybe you're right, Nina and Mari, I do talk a lot. My dad came to my house. My mother separated from my dad and was with Bridgers by name. I don't know the full story, so I'm not taking sides. But he came to the house with a gun because he wanted to unlife my mother and her new boyfriend or whatever. And he sees me sitting in my high chair. I'm 2 years old, and he decides to turn away because he didn't want to make me an orphan, because she would be dead and he would be in jail. But like sucking up that kind of pain, like, you know, it affects you. So. So. Anyway, I didn't want to end on that note.
Well,
So we have the time for a little bit more. Oh.
I know, that's so good.
Oh yeah. We'll take a picture with the cake. And please, I'm not taking this home. I'll take a couple pictures with it. There's photo ops over there. We'll get the staff to cut you cake. And, you know, for those of you who need to work out, forget about it for the holiday season.